Welcome, HA. How are you doing? I see you there. Have you
Hi,
unmuted yourself?
Elizabeth. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. This is
Nico, what's up?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Good.
Long time no see.
Yeah. I'm very, very honored to be here. This is such a, an amazing moment in history, and we just all want Julian Assange free.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, HA. And this is an interesting situation because some of the viewers here will know that me and Susie both have been interviewed by you a number of times. So now the tables have turned and you're here with us. Thank you for joining us on this vigil. And just to start off, I think I'm going to kind of broach this with every guest that we have on the vigil, is what is the importance and significance to you of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, not only in the sense of the amazing, effective scientific journalism that they've done, but also in the sense of Julian Assange's human rights? If you could just give us some of your thoughts on both those subjects, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he publishes the truth. It's authentic, pristine documents. They're authentic and pristine, and the truth is not partisan. It's just reality. It has no if the truth exposes left or right, what does it matter? It's actually what took place. So the only sin of Julian Assange is that he told the truth. And in our world, people don't want to hear that. People want to hear whatever helps their side win. And when Julian Assange, whether it's the Iraq war logs or Afghanistan or how many countries in the world has he published? Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Russia. He is a publisher. WikiLeaks is a publisher. The UK has actually ruled that they're a publisher, a media organization.
Absolutely.
WikiLeaks emails have already been admissible in court in the UK.
And actually, I just want to break in one moment there to give people a factoid about what you just, that sentence, which is that not only have they been admitted in court in the UK, but they've actually been cited in over 48,000 academic papers and court cases. So the impact there is huge. Now, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And so what do we have? Like, we have the Washington, I always say, like, without Assange and WikiLeaks, all we're stuck with is the Washington Post. And exactly. I mean, you're doing amazing work, Elizabeth. I'm like, in awe of the work you're doing at Disobedient Media. And what should be reality is that Disobedient Media and, of course, like WikiLeaks should be as big or as influential as the Washington Post, the New York Times, all of them. And actually, WikiLeaks is in many ways bigger than all of them. But what's taken place is that because they published pristine documents that don't adhere to a narrative or a spin or propaganda blitz. They're not public relations documents. Actually, they expose the shortcomings, the criminal behavior, the dirty, underhanded behavior of people in power. And that's spun as, oh, well, he's working to help another country's interest because it's hurting the United States of America.
Yes.
So then we should never have any journalism in here because it would always just expose, help another country hurt us in some Orwellian McCarthy era, logic. So
no, it literally does translate into them being prosecuted and persecuted for doing the most effective journalism that happens in this day and age. That's what it is. It's really, really shocking. But
yeah, no,
I don't know
absolutely.
if you have just some insight on that, on how, because I know that you've written for the Huffington Post, you've written for so long, you've been published in these outlets. So how is WikiLeaks as a press outlet so uniquely effective, and how is that a part of them being persecuted so much and the hypocrisy there?
Well, usually, like when I used to write for when I used to be published in publications that were on the left, there is an editor, and the editor has an angle or a theme or some kind of political viewpoint they want to further. And even I was a contributor on The Hill. It's more middle of the road, maybe, somewhat more conservative than obviously the Huffington Post or Salon, but like there's always an editor, there's a mission statement for the publication, or there's some kind of goal they want to achieve. Usually it's a political goal. With WikiLeaks, there's no political goal. It's just, if the truth happens to expose the left or the right, it's just, what they publish. But that's very dangerous.
Exactly.
And
it's revolutionary.
Yeah, it's absolutely revolutionary. I mean, now all we have is like anonymous sources with not. So I have to trust these reporters or journalists at the Washington Post, New York Times. 99.9% are hardcore for one political party. So it's like, obviously they're not going to expose the overt propaganda of everything taking place, because then it would hurt first of all, they wouldn't be published. So even if, let's say they decided to be like, I want to be like Elizabeth Voss or Susie Dawson or Julian Assange or all these, they would never be published. And they might even be fired, because if they kept on pitching ideas to their editor and it was always, here, let's expose the truth about people in power, let's expose the truth here. I'm not going to, here's a whistleblower. They're at risk of their lives. Don't give the identity to anybody. And, knowing this, because also with the Pentagon Papers, what took place, I think after the Pentagon Papers, these publications, the Washington Post and other publications said, you know what, we're not going to take that risk anymore. And when Julian Assange, came on to this, in the world scene and started exposing the corrupt behavior of people, that was very dangerous to a lot of, really, really powerful entities and governments and political figures. So they don't want to know that Bernie was, one political side does not want to know that Bernie was cheated. And they'll spin that into this grandiose theme of, oh my God, it's in other countries, so.
I think that's completely correct. And I think that, so in light of that, in light of the way that there is always an agenda, and even if people don't think they have an agenda, they are still filtering that first, the primary source material, if they even use an actual primary source of some kind or the words of somebody they actually spoke to, they're still filtering that through their own, lens. And as you've said, what we're seeing with the WikiLeaks publications is no filter, no interpretation. It is simply the evidence left by the people that were creating the emails, the videos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in your perspective, how has WikiLeaks affected your journalism? And in some way, would you be able, you think, to function as an independent journalist without WikiLeaks if you didn't have their evidence to cite in your reporting?
Well, I think that WikiLeaks is like the last line of defense between an Orwellian society and the truth. We don't have, it was CNN. It was kind of funny. CNN was like, I forgot who it was, some reporter there. It was like, Trump is attacking a fair press. And I was like laughing, like, what? It's just, it's just unbelievable that people don't realize that the CNN and the Washington Post, the New York Times, MSNBC, all the pundits, they have a very overt agenda, and it's not the truth. It's to further entertainment. See, a lot of it also is that there's no entertainment value necessarily for WikiLeaks, and journalism has become synonymous with entertainment. So like MSNBC and CNN, I remember like when I was first, I've been on MSNBC a couple of times and CNN a bunch of times. And when I first went in the studio, I just remember like, it's just like this, like it was like a 1984 movie, like 50, 60 like flat screens everywhere with like, it looked like some kind of like casino in Vegas.
Interesting. Huh?
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, it's real. Like, this is crazy. This is the machine. This is the media machine. And it was, you could tell that the number one goal was advertising and the number one goal was entertainment, not some kind of like cerebral endeavor where, oh my God, you have to like look inward and say, oh no, we're really corrupt. We have to change.
Like not real investigative journalism at all.
Yeah, there's no investigative journal, even for like local papers now. I mean, that's like, that type of thing is gone. And when you look also like every major story, the journalist that breaks that story and it's unpopular is attacked. Nobody believes that journalist until finally, and they're discredited, and they're and so many come to mind. I just can't remember like at this moment.
Yeah, there are so many examples of that type of that exact story playing out. Yeah, definitely.
And as that journalist is trying to convey the truth, they're attacked by their colleagues, by the media. And instead of Gary Webb is an example. So that's what I was looking for.
Very good example. I believe WikiLeaks tweeted about Gary Webb recently, saying something along the lines of, it took 8 years for the CIA and the press, I believe that was the tweet, to kill Gary Webb. So if for people that are familiar, could you give us a little bit of a background on that?
Yeah, I mean, he broke the story about the origins of crack cocaine and the CIA's involvement and all of that, bringing in cocaine into the country and into impoverished neighborhoods.
Which is a huge story. Huge.
Yeah, this nefarious, story where nobody was talking about it. And then, of course, the Washington Post, I'm just here, 2014, Gary Webb was no journalism hero, despite what the Kill the Messenger, what Kill the Messenger says. It's like they don't want to give any credit to anyone who destroys the prevailing narrative. So this is a Telegraph, though. In 1996, journalist Gary Webb began looking into links between Nicaragua's drug-running Contra rebels and the CIA, and how all of those drugs flowed into the inner cities of our country, and the CIA was involved. And The Intercept wrote a great article, how the CIA watched over the destruction of Gary Webb. But here's a journalist. Here's a man who, he exposed the wrongdoing and the criminal behavior of our government. And so, but we don't want to hear the journalism nowadays is not about being intrepid. It's about following the herd. And if you follow the herd, you're good. If you're not, and it's like Julian Assange is like a Gary Webb on a global scale. So, I mean, in Gary Webb was like just this amazing, phenomenal journalist who really broke the mold. And he exposed a story that, that impacted millions of Americans. What Assange is doing has global impact, millions and millions of people throughout the planet. Because sources, WikiLeaks, they're publishers. They don't hack anywhere. They don't hack computers. So that's exactly why every WikiLeaks document should be admissible in court.
Absolutely. Very good point.
I mean, that's why would you not want evidence? That's the thing also. We don't even know what evidence means anymore. What they try to do also is they hide behind semantics. So they hide behind semantics, and Orwell said that euphemisms were verbal refuse. So you see, like, in my opinion, one political side more than the other, but you'll see both political sides use euphemisms all the time. And if you look at one side, their use of euphemism is like just omnipresent, like always. They're always using some kind of phrase that's all encompassing and sweeping. And then, of course, they're blaming a country for their, inability to win. But it's like lost in all of this, all these passions flowing around, is the fact that here you have a man, Julian Assange, who's there's such malice also. Like the UK is like,
exactly.
won't even allow him freedom because of, some kind, not even a crime, because there was no case. The whole point was like, there's no
It was
case in Sweden ever.
Yeah, there were no charges. For those who are not familiar with the details on that, there were never any charges against Julian Assange that were actually filed. And the investigation itself, the Swedish authorities wanted to drop their investigation in 2013, and the UK pressured them not to, which was all revealed by the amazing journalist Stephanie Marizzi. Her incredible work has been just, I can't even express how important her work has been in showing us the way that the persecution of Assange has not been normal. It hasn't been the average treatment of a journalist or just any person. So, but eventually in 2017, the Swedish government and the authorities there did drop their investigation officially. So now he is unable to leave in part because he will be, picked up by the authorities, the UK authorities, no matter what. Period. Like there have been photographs published showing that he will absolutely be, arrested no matter what the circumstances are that if he were to leave the embassy. But nominally, it's supposed to be over a bail skipping issue, which doesn't even relate to any charges and relates to an investigation that's now dropped. And so that's the context on that for all of anyone who doesn't know. And it really it has been very, very interesting to see. In recent days, we've had Adam Schiff seem to admit that there is a giant apparatus that is hellbent in the US on arresting and prosecuting Julian Assange, which really reveals that the whole bail skipping issue and the whole Sweden case, all of that was just, basically meaningless and a facade for the real prosecution that's going on behind the scenes. So I didn't mean to completely interrupt your thought, but I wanted to kind of like grab people's attention and give them some context on what you're mentioning and referring to. But continue, please.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And also, like, I want to emphasize that there's such malice, there's such like hate, and it goes beyond petty. It's this, it's like this really unhealthy, and they think that attacking the messenger, they think that silences the message, but what it does is it actually amplifies the message. And it makes Assange, and I know he's suffering a great deal, and I know that he's experiencing such injustice, but it makes him more of a hero. What they try to do is they silence him and attack him and persecute him, but it makes him more of a hero. It emboldens and amplifies his voice louder than ever. And now you have people throughout the planet, millions of people who are constantly thinking, okay, what's going on with Julian Assange? When is he going to be free? And they know what's going on too. Like there's this vapid, childish, like stupid attempt at, if we just, cut his internet, and if he can't speak anymore, and, then suddenly the truth won't be heard. But WikiLeaks is still around. And I mean, what I always say, Elizabeth, is like, I'm not like, God forbid, like I'm not saying that this exists, but people within the intelligence community or people who don't like Julian Assange, they're pretty short-sighted and they lack wisdom, because let's say there was a bizarro world Julian Assange, like an evil WikiLeaks. That type of organization could, actually be dangerous. This organization, WikiLeaks, and Julian Assange, they're just based on noble virtues. Okay, exactly. We want to go ahead. We have these sources. We're publishing this information.
Actually, earlier, John Kiyosaki was talking about the CIA, and Susie pointed out that where WikiLeaks is based on revealing the truth, the CIA is based on lies. And so if actually in the bizarre world you're describing, the inversion of WikiLeaks would be the CIA, I think. And that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Exactly. And most Americans don't even, like, they can't even explain how the CIA protects them. They have no idea how the CIA protects them. They have no idea how the NSA protects them. Americans don't really. And so when you have like CNN or the Washington Post saying, oh, this is a threat. How so? How is the truth a threat? The truth is never a threat unless you have an agenda and it hurts your agenda. Otherwise, you know, most sane and rational people would say, okay, well, if there's a problem, let's fix it. If our political system is not functioning correctly, let's try to make it more efficient or fair or equitable. But we don't do that. We say, oh my God, you let us know how horrible one candidate was. So we're going to try to sweep everything under the rug and say that it was some country's fault.
Well, and I think that as well, in addition to that, you have an establishment, as we've said multiple times in this stream, that really is a unified front, that is not something that exists only in one political party or one branch of government. It's a very much a unified kind of unelected power structure. And the interesting thing to me is seeing how they have been this kind of naturally occurring structure has been able to operate for decades without being truly held accountable. As you're saying, they've been able to really get away with this. And so now they've become so dependent on their ability to control press narratives, et cetera, that when you have something like WikiLeaks come up, decades into their operation as, sort of a media controlling sort of unified front, it really truly goes at the heart of their ability to function. And I think that goes to what you're saying for sure. And it's totally also unprecedented.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It goes at the heart of their ability to function. But see, what they're not looking at, people in the intelligence community, there's or whatever. Let's just assume that whoever doesn't like WikiLeaks or Assange in any country, not just the US, what they don't realize is that it's actually a good thing. Even if your intelligence agencies are, their raison d'etre is to be secretive, it's actually a good thing for sources to have an outlet to then say, hey, this is a lot of corruption here. You can keep like 98% of your corruption or 99%. We're just going to go ahead and inform the public of 1%. Can we get 1%? Can we get a 0.5%? And so it's a good, healthy outlet. Like societies need WikiLeaks because, like I said, the Washington Post, MSNBC, their goal is to sell ads and entertainment and, fabricate, foment this outrage for one side. It's very overt. You do need that outlet in this day and age, especially in a digital world, in, this cyber world that we live in. If you try to silence that outlet, then God forbid, and I'm saying God forbid because, like, let's say there are people who are watching this and they're saying, oh, H.A. Goodman is, does he know something? No, I'm not. I'm looking into the future and I'm saying if it's just logical progression of thought, it's logical that if you deny and attack and try to silence a publication that publishes whistleblowers, then it's feasible another publication or another entity could rise up out of spite because there's just such an overt malice when it comes to the UK or so the secret grand jury, all of these things.
Well, it really shows, like their reaction to WikiLeaks, as you're saying, it reveals the hypocrisy of the liberal ideals that the West is supposed to have. So when we talk about freedom of the press and for democracy and all of these things, when they attack Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, like you're saying, it really shows that those ideals are not something that we actually operate with, and that's unique, I think, in that level of confirmation of that. But I was wondering, I wanted to get your thoughts on how you think things have progressed in the last 2 months. Unfortunately, we're going into the third month of Julian Assange being isolated. Have you seen a massive increase in support for Assange? What have been your thoughts on how the whole story has developed with this?
Well, I wrote an article in the Daily Caller, Free Julian Assange, and I was very, very, very honored to have WikiLeaks, but also extremely honored to have Mrs. Christine Assange share it. And I think that, on the positive end, the people who really care about WikiLeaks and really care about Julian Assange and want him free, we're all emboldened. We have even greater purpose now. Unfortunately, on the other side of the equation, I do think that I think that people who want him silenced feel this is a temporary victory for them. So maybe I'm just like I see the glass half empty, but I think that there are people who want to silence Assange, and they see this as a temporary victory, but they're not. They lack the wisdom to realize that no, it's only emboldened people who really care about Assange.
And I think that's why we see also, like, when you say it's emboldened the opposition to Assange, an example of that would definitely be those 6 Guardian articles, and I think another 1 or 2 was published recently where they're attempting to smear him. So yeah, you do see kind of like emboldening of both sides of that coin, I think.
Yeah, it's also interesting. Why would you, if you're the Guardian or if you're anyone, they're going to be next. They're too stupid to realize that.
That is an important point, and that is something that has been touched on by WikiLeaks and by I believe Stephanie Marizzi, and a number of their legal representatives have stated really clearly that what is happening to Assange and to WikiLeaks right now is like a death knell of the ability of the free press to function. Because if you prosecute a publisher who has done nothing wrong in terms of simply publishing information, then are you going to then prosecute the Washington Post or the New York Times for publishing a leak? And John Kiriaki pointed out earlier that Washington runs on leaks. So yeah, I would love to get your perspective on that.
Well, yeah, and also these people are so stupid that when they try to attack Julian Assange, they don't realize that their publication would sell them out in like a nanosecond. They would be sold. They would, before they could even step foot in the building, the authorities would take them and arrest them and put them in jail if they ever actually, came up with a story and had actual, real sources about some kind of grandiose criminal wrongdoing within government. And that's not just the US, that's the UK too. And so if Julian Assange, God forbid, is, silenced, then the Guardian is next, the Washington Post is next, because in the event that they actually do want to engage in serious investigative journalism in the future, whomever is the next, let's say, truth teller, a person who wants to publish something that nobody has the guts to publish, it'll be a million times easier to make that person's life miserable. So they're pretty stupid too. Like these journalists, what they don't realize, they think they're attacking like the negative qualities, or like, I don't want to be too partisan, but what I want to say is that, like, there are journalists who don't like WikiLeaks because they feel that WikiLeaks emboldens their political opposition, and then they assign all these qualities, these attributes like racism and sexism, whatever, to that political opposition that they want to oppose. So because WikiLeaks published in the election emails that hurt their side, they then make the connection, oh, well, if I'm fighting WikiLeaks, then I'm also fighting, Trump and whatever people that,
And they're associating WikiLeaks with a political narrative that they want to push.
Exactly. That doesn't matter. Or they want to oppose.
Yeah, exactly. And so it doesn't matter if that is a reversal of the narrative that was pushed against WikiLeaks the day before. It can oscillate back and forth about who you attack. You use WikiLeaks to attack in that type of narrative. But and that's, again, I'll say it again, the unity in the fact that they are attacking Assange, no matter what the publications that WikiLeaks publishes, he is attacked constantly. And so that is why it is so important to have a unified front of supporters from all sides, because we have to kind of reflect, and we have to be the inverse of that unelected power structure that in persecuting WikiLeaks. But can you speak at all about any of the ways that, in general, your investigative or independent journalism would not be able to have either been effective or wouldn't have been able to happen at all if WikiLeaks didn't exist? Because as an independent journalist also, I have noticed so many times that there are articles that disobedient media could not have published if WikiLeaks didn't exist, and it covers a huge range of topics. So I didn't know if you had any comments on that.
Well, okay. The DNC and Podesta emails influenced me a great deal, and they influenced my thought process. So just like on Twitter right now, somebody was like, well, then why are you telling me to vote for this person? I'm not telling anyone to vote for anybody. You can do what you want. But knowing that Bernie Sanders was cheated and knowing the extent, you had Nico House just on, Nico and Jared and Elizabeth Beck. Yeah. The DNC took money, hundreds of millions, and this is important.
Yeah, we wouldn't be having that conversation without WikiLeaks. Without WikiLeaks, that conversation would not exist. So
yeah, you can't, like, I would like to know if I'm being kicked in the face. I would like to know if, I'm being stabbed in the back. I don't want to just like walk and stroll and be happy and, oh, there's a dagger in my back. That's fantastic. I want to know what's taking place. And I want to know the nature of what's taking place in wars. I want to know, how, if there are people who within the CIA, for example, or within the military, whether it's Chelsea Manning or it's important, or whether Edward Snowden, I want to know if, James Clapper is lying, or John Brennan. I want to know if these people are lying because we pay their salaries. The whole point is, the intelligence community works for the American people. That's lost in all of this. We don't owe anything to the CIA. The CIA owes something to us. They are supposed to protect us.
Exactly.
And if they're, yeah, go on.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I was just looking through some of the questions we've got from the chat. And one that people brought up was, when the day comes, what are Julian's options the day he leaves the embassy? And we've talked about before, we know that it would depend on, I don't want to answer this for HA, but we are aware that at this time there would only be one outcome, and that would be his arrest. He does not have an option to leave the embassy right this minute. But I would still like to hear HA's opinion on, options, maybe if the situation changes and he's able to leave the embassy.
I think that if he ever did leave the embassy, it would be a situation where he's assured of freedom, and he's assured that, they're not going to try to take him to some kind of secret grand jury. So I'm assuming that, he has a brilliant legal team, and, I believe that he's going to, I believe Assange will be vindicated and that he will be successful because there's too much momentum in terms of the truth on his side. And it's really like, it's not even, I don't even want to use the word childish because it's an insult to children. Like, it's absurd that we know that they're just hurting him out of spite. We know that there's no charges against him. There are no charges. We know there's no case against him. They're trying to imprison him within the embassy because of a minor infraction that is not even, doesn't correlate to this kind of ongoing torture. And the United Nations ruled in his favor. UK courts are ruling in his favor. So at the end of the day, I do think that the tables will turn. There's just too much momentum in terms of truth. And I think the best thing, like I always say, like for me, I'm not saying for anyone else, I'm not telling anyone else what to do, but for me, not being partisan, I'm just saying I'm voting for Trump in 2020, but I would not vote for Trump if, God forbid, Julian was arrested and sent to the United States. Then I would not vote.
If that happened on the behest of Trump's administration or his DOJ, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
That's the way you... Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and so moving on to a different question, because I'm just looking at the questions we've gotten from chat right now, and they asked a question that doesn't go to what you were saying, but I think it's important to ask while you're here. And they said, what do you feel is the best way to promote the anti-war movement in the USA at this point? And I wanted to ask you that specifically because I know we're going to have a number of guests that are from Australia or do not reside in the US. So I wanted to get your perspective as a journalist in the US on the state of the anti-war movement and how a real anti-war movement can be built in the US now.
Well, I can't really. I don't want to be partisan. Okay, too partisan. But I will say this: in my humble view, there is really no anti-war movement in the United States of America, and sadly, there's more of an anti-war movement on the right than there is on the left. I've noticed that a lot of the organizations that popped up after the election that were, deemed like pro Bernie Sanders or Jill Stein, they focused purely on domestic issues. And I never hear bring our soldiers home from war. I never hear end perpetual counterinsurgency wars or just perpetual wars. This is not what I've been actually told by many people is, who cares? Who cares? Look what he's doing, or look at this, or, there's other issues, the climate change. I had one very intelligent person, if you can believe this, one very intelligent person say to me, well, climate change will kill more Americans or more people than wars. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, this is the extent of the there needs to be a movement of people that will not vote for a candidate if they are willing to send Americans overseas. I think that, and unfortunately, there are more people on the right, in my view, than on the left who will take that vantage point. But I don't see it. Yeah.
That's an interesting recent phenomenon we've seen, the anti-war right movement. And that's not partisan, simply to observe that has been kind of a phenomenon that we've witnessed. Do you think there would be any ways to encourage that to grow beyond partisan boundaries, not to have an anti-war left or an anti-war right, but to just have an anti-war movement? Do you think that's possible?
The problem with is that there's too many euphemisms and labels used. So the rebuttal to that, I've been told by people, is that, well, they're not really anti-war, they're just isolationists. It's like, well, I don't care what the word is. It really doesn't matter what your motivation is to advocate you bring soldiers home. Yes, it's just not, it doesn't do anyone any good to be overstretched and to constantly engage in wars throughout the world or to fund wars. It makes the world less safe, but it also creates a situation where we have veterans who have, given so much, in many cases, their lives to the country. Their families suffer. I've spoken to veterans, and they have night terrors. Like some, in their 20s or early 30s, like they have these, like, really they can't sleep because of all the horrors that they've seen. So, but see, unfortunately, historically, the left has been the anti-war party or movement. Yeah. But now it's more so on the right, I say. So until Democrats say, or until people on the left say, we want to bring our soldiers home, we have no business being in these places forever, I don't think that there's going to be a viable anti-war movement. I mean,
I think that that's an important and realistic answer to that question. And then thank you to whoever in the audience asked that. What are some of the ways that you think that the public, the people watching, can tangibly help Assange and WikiLeaks beyond the normal sort of donate, sign petitions? As a journalist, what do you think is the most effective way that people can actually make a difference in this fight to reconnect Julian?
Well, I think that, just, read the work of, brilliant journalists like Susie Dawson and you and support WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. If you want to donate to them, if you want to write a letter to your congressman or write a letter to, they're almost certainly not going to read it, but it doesn't matter. The more letters written, the more, people should start writing on Medium their own thoughts. Good point. They should go ahead and write their own thoughts. They should go ahead and be active with their own feelings. There's, a really, really wonderful. There's a really, really wonderful person on Twitter. Her name's Angel Fox, and she's just great. Her handle is at Angel Fox Today. So. But she's always writing and, supporting. And there's a lot of supporters. There's a lot of people who are, finding creative ways. I know there's a WikiLeaks art. There's WikiLeaks. Yeah, you can, create artwork.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and say, that's something I mentioned right at the beginning of the stream, was that people should definitely take a look at Yara Spot art. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that handle correctly, but it's YARRASPOT. So that account was photographing yesterday a number of pictures of graffiti and repainted graffiti that she had painted onto a wall, and I believe Hosier Lane. I believe it's in Melbourne, but it's really famous location for public art. And so what she had done is she had posted, painted, Unity 4J, Free Julian Assange, and all of this information on the wall. And it was such a beautiful and inspiring, show of support. And it just shows how with something as simple as a public wall and a paintbrush, you can get the message out there. And here, you and I are speaking in the US, that wall is in Australia, where, the impact of these messages can be felt across the globe. And I think that is, I hope that people do take into account their own talents and their own ability to make a difference. That doesn't have to be journalism. It doesn't have to be writing. It can be painting. You can make a song. You can make an album, whatever, you have to be creative and not let, the bounds of your own thinking limit your attempts.
Or help. Just like if you had a day or a week where thousands and thousands of Assange and WikiLeaks supporters would just constantly write poetry throughout on Twitter, just 5-6 poems a day for thousands and thousands of people, you would have this cosmic. It would cleanse Twitter of all the hate. Yeah,
it might come close.
Remember, Ghostbusters 2, there's slime, and it's because of all this hate. I mean, Twitter is full of this negative energy. And if people could go ahead and thousands or millions of people who care about WikiLeaks, just write poetry, a short poem on Twitter. I mean,
that's a really good lesson to be positive and to have that message be purely positive. I think that would be definitely really helpful. And that's one thing that we're trying to do here too with this vigil, is trying to just be supportive and positive in our, discussion of how to help.
If there's one thing that I could tell Julian Assange, it would be that there's so many millions of people who care about him and who love him and who care about him, and I should say that who admire his heroism and his courage. And of course, I mean, I can only imagine how much he's suffering and all the obstacles he has to go through. But there is a movement of just millions of people throughout the world. Whether it's organized or not, there's just so many people throughout the planet who want him free. And there's not many examples in life, and especially in politics, where it's just good versus evil. I don't know of any. I mean, I get into arguments, people are like, no, this is a little bit more complicated, whatever. But this is good versus evil. This is just good. There's really nothing. There's only good. The truth is good, and it's authentic too, because they don't say it would be one thing. It would be one thing if Julian and WikiLeaks edited or added something to the documents they published.
I completely agree. And I think that what you're saying, the black and whiteness of the kind of the good guy versus bad guy sort of situation comes from the fact, as you're saying, that they are just publishing the truth. And so then it becomes the people that are wanting to protect the lies are the ones that attack them. And that's why you have this really binary kind of situation. And that's also why it's so important for legacy press that when it acts as an extension of the state, to demean and to mock and to smear WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, because that's the only way that they can diffuse their support. So that's definitely something that's really important to note and take into account.
Yeah, and also they're not the Guardian or certain journalists here and there. They're not fooling anyone. Just because they think that the truth hurts their side, it's plain to see that it doesn't hurt any specific side. It's just the truth. Maybe they should just look at their side and try to fix their side. So,
but there has been no accountability from across the spectrum, like the organizations, the individuals that have been shown to be corrupt or hypocritical. almost universally do not sort of own up and take responsibility for their own actions. And that's, again, another reason that WikiLeaks is so attacked, is because they don't want to take account of what they've done. They just want to end that truth being broadcasted.
Exactly. They don't want the truth being told, so they just want to put their heads in the sand like an ostrich, and they just don't want to deal with reality. There's also tremendous amount of groupthink, tremendous amount of people are afraid to think for themselves, and they're even afraid also to like a tweet. It's gone so bad.
Yeah, the echo chambers that divide people. That's definitely something this vigil is attempting to kind of breach and break through, because it's so. And you were saying earlier that you have pundits and journalists that, although they're supposed to be able to be sort of accessible universally, they end up speaking to a niche audience that they only speak to that little group, and so that again goes along with this factionalism, this echo chambers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty unbelievable that in this day and age, there really isn't there aren't many examples of good versus evil, or truth versus people who want to hide the truth. And I always like to think of it like in terms of, if this is a movie, the good guys are not Brennan and Clapper and Comey and all these. They're not going to be cast as the good guys. No, not. The Washington Post will not be like, or CNN or The Guardian. These people who are going against WikiLeaks now will not be cast in a favorable light in the future. And that's what they lack vision. They completely lack vision because of that echo chamber and their allegiance to being, it's like this popularity contest. So, the cool kids don't want the truth revealed about them, so they lash out. But at the end of the day, look, truth, when you have this amount of truth, and really it's just everything they publish is authentic and pristine. The interesting thing is also whenever politicians talk about WikiLeaks emails, they never say that it's not accurate. They never say they're not accurate. They always focus on motive and trying to link some kind of conspiracy. Like they're the ones. The conspiracy theory would be that, oh well, this fits. It's go on.
Or the journalist, like the one infamous time when I believe it's Cuomo who said it's illegal to look at WikiLeaks. So they try to actually prevent you looking at it as opposed to even addressing what's in it.
And he's so confident too. Like this is illegal. And it's like, you're stupid. It's not illegal at all. Yeah. And so, and then it's, these hilarious, the Washington Post says democracy dies in darkness.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the one publisher that's publishing light truth is trying to they're trying to stifle Assange and WikiLeaks. So yeah, I mean, it's just so obvious.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the unique things about WikiLeaks too, is the way that it in the reaction to them, the way that it has shown all of that hypocrisy and the depth of it, and the way that it forces like Cuomo to make ridiculous statements like that. It's very, very.
Well, CNN also botched the story about WikiLeaks giving Trump Jr. emails before they were published.
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, then you have journalists who attack WikiLeaks because they think that they're on the side of justice, just simply because the truth was inconvenient for them. So.
Okay. And so do you have any thoughts on just focusing on Assange as a human being? Do you have any thoughts on the human rights violations that are happening? And just kind of, as we were just saying, that this is happening to a journalist who is uniquely effective, that they are being prosecuted like this. Like, as a journalist, how does that strike you? How do you feel about that, et cetera?
I mean, as a human being, they're acting out of pure malice and hate, and they're just trying to hurt him just for the sake of retribution. This is about political retribution, and they want to, they feel that the truth was a threat and the truth undermined their chances to win. So, and then you get to the establishment, current administration, and then there's like kind of a merging of the political party that's, you know, angry and filled with hate, and then just people within the government, the way they operate, you know, trying to just say, oh, well, you know, this is, you know, we have to keep secrecy. Meanwhile, you have a Secretary of State who's basically gave the whole country secrets everywhere in terms of cybersecurity. But as a human being, I mean, I think it's remarkable what he's accomplished. I mean, he's a global figure now. So, I mean, he's part of history. He's part of world history. So, I mean, he will forever be, and I do believe he's going to be vindicated, you know, soon. I believe he's going to win. I believe he'll be free. And the people who were on his side now will, you know, we were on the side of right. We were on the side of justice. The people who attacked him, of course, will try to sheepishly, you know, say that, well, you know, they were always on Assange's side. Meanwhile,
you definitely see that. When something becomes historically, like, you don't want to go near that situation that you supported at that time, you definitely see people kind of minimizing their involvement.
Jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, as a human being, I think he's a remarkable human being. I mean, to be able to do to be able to have accomplished what he's accomplished and continue to fight and battle. I mean, it's really, I mean, it's not just, you know, getting knocked down, it's him getting back up and continuing to fight. I think it's a really amazing thing.
Definitely. And the fact that he fights for us in that way, and I mean, I believe he published a letter when he was a week or two, I think, into being gagged in this latest, you know, cutting off of his communications. He actually published a letter in support of journalists that I believe were missing in Ecuador and were later found dead. And he was, you know, really fighting for people, even when he's in the most serious situation. So I think that a number of people point this out, but it's definitely important to reiterate that just as Julian Assange fights for others, no matter what, we need to fight for him because he is acting in our interest. So
absolutely. I agree 100%. Absolutely.
But, we have 5 minutes left of this segment. Are there any thoughts that you want to add or that we haven't covered? Any issues around WikiLeaks that you think are important to raise for the audience?
Well, I just am honored to be here, like I was for the first vigil. And I just think that, you know, without WikiLeaks, we're stuck with, and, you know, a media that is beholden to advertising dollars and entertainment. They're not focused on truth. They're not focused on pristine documents. They're just focused on hearsay and gossip. Everything that, not to get too, you know, deep into it and partisan, but everything that we're seeing now is based on hearsay, gossip, innuendo, suspicion, no evidence. You know, and that's why I believe WikiLeaks, the UK has already ruled that WikiLeaks emails are admissible in court. So what better example of evidence than, you know, pristine documents?
Absolutely. And I think and I think earlier you mentioned that he had a number of decisions in his favor from the UN, and I just want to specify, I believe it was the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. I may have bungled part of that, but basically it's a really well-respected body within the UN, and he has had, I believe, 2 rulings that have shown that he is he is being arbitrarily detained, and so that's a really serious situation. And thank you, HA, for joining us. It's been an amazing time talking to you. And I want to emphasize again how amazing it is to have all of these journalists, activists, whistleblowers from completely different backgrounds coming here to unite for Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. And I know that a lot of our viewers will know what your YouTube and Twitter handles, etc. are, but if you want to just let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, if you type in H.A. Goodman on YouTube, you can find my channel, and then it's at H.A. Goodman Author on Twitter. And I'm just honored to be here, and just thank you so much for this discussion. And I know that we all want Julian Assange, and I do believe he's going to be free and victorious.